This is now the start of the afternoon session. I hope you've all had a nice lunch and gone to the loo and are ready for the rest of the afternoon of digital publishing. So I am very, very delighted to introduce Baroness Lane Fox of Soho to Publishing for Digital Minds.
Thank you.
And it is really hard to craft an introduction to Martha Lane Fox that doesn't read like this sort of over-the-top, dazzling list of achievements.
I think I could do it.
Actually, I
think
wasn't
mine would
able.
be kind of parallel terrible.
So I'm saying that that's impossible. And so that's pretty much what this is going to be. I have no doubt that all of you are incredibly familiar with all of the things that Martha has done for us. But just in case, I am going to recap, because she started in 1998, or actually prior to 98, but in 98 co-founded lastminute.com, which became this incredible phenomenon, Europe's largest travel and leisure website, and she steered it through kind of bubbles and changes and took it public and then sold it in 2005, and then pretty much immediately jumped straight into co-founding Lucky Voice, and then revolutionised the karaoke industry and author care as we know it. She has her own, see, a few people got that. There's a big bill for author care and Lucky Voice where I came from. She has her own charitable foundation, Antigone.org.uk, and she's a patron of AbilityNet, of Reprieve, of CamFed, of Just for Kids Law. She chairs Makey Lab, which we referenced a bit this morning, which is where you design your own doll and you can have it 3D printed. She's the chair of the philanthropic arm of Founders Forum, so she helps and guides entrepreneurs to use their power for good rather than for evil. She was the government's digital champion. She's now a crossbench peer at the House of Lords, a non-exec director at M&S, and for the Women's Prize for Fiction, is the chair of Go On UK, and most recently the Chancellor of the Open University. And so her career really has spanned everything that's very important to every one of us, I think, in this room. So that's technology, entrepreneurship, social inclusion, great writing, and karaoke. And in 2013, she was awarded the CBE, and I am not at all bloody surprised. Martha, welcome, and thank you so much for coming to speak with us today.
Thank you very much. I don't think I'm going to be quiet now, because I don't think I can possibly live up to that very kind introduction.
Well, I will be quiet after just asking you, really, I'm going to start with your most recent announcement, which is as the Chancellor of the Open University, so congratulations. And I think the OU is, and has always been, really famous for accessibility, for allowing everybody to learn, and it's now using digital technology to further this ethos. And it would be great if you would talk a little bit about how organisations like the ones in this room, like publishers, can use digital to open up access to stories and to knowledge, and to avoid alienating anyone on lower social economic means or non-digital natives.
Big question.
Yeah.
But it's one that I have been thinking about for about the last 5 years, when I was in the middle of a Lucky Voice board meeting, which aren't very serious because it's just me and the other co-founder, and we're normally forcing ourselves to sing. He's a very good singer, I'm a very bad singer. And I got a call on my mobile, and it was the then Prime Minister, Gordon Brown, which was quite surprising because he didn't have my mobile number, so I thought. And he asked me if I'd come and work on the issue of digital skills. And because I'm a muppet and had never really thought about it, I kind of thought that most people in the country, probably, I knew some people, but most people knew how to use the web or had access to the web. But guess what? They did not. Then it was about 11 million adults who'd never used the web, and now it's going down, but there's still a lot of people who haven't, 7 million. And even more kind of disturbingly, and the thing I've been working hard on, is the notion of digital skills, so not just whether or not you've switched on and off the internet, but whether you can actually get the benefits from it. So being Chancellor of the OU is an incredible honour, because it is the intersection of lots of the things that I've been lucky enough to work in. And also, it gets me a reason to have a cup of tea with Betty Boothroyd in the House of Lords. I follow her around like a small puppy. She's absolutely awesome. And she was the Chancellor too before me, so I finally got a reason to ask her out on a date, which is great. But the reason that I think I am still blown away by the web every single day, even though I'm not a crazy techno-utopian, it's because of the power that it can bring into people's lives in really the most incredibly complex situations. And a lot of that is to do with all of the content and the things that people in this room will have and know more about than me. And to give you a kind of very recent example, I was in Sunderland on Wednesday. I actually went to Sunderland Football Club to present some digital awards. And I got to go out of the tunnel like a footballer. It was very exciting. And give awards to people locally who'd done amazing digital things. And one of the people that I met was called Jorge. And Jorge is a Chilean political asylum refugee when he was young, came here when he was about 16, I think, and had had a really complex time and had had a horrible family situation that he was escaping from, and had really built a life here in the UK that was quite remarkable, and had recently learned how to use the web and had self-published a book of photos about Chile. And this had kind of taken off, partly starting with his own local community in Sunderland. Who knew there were so many Chilean people in Sunderland? And now, because of his kind of notoriety, he's getting a publishing deal from a normal publisher. And there was Jorge, just the most delightful person you could ever imagine. And it really reiterated to me the importance of the stories and the very personal things that can be that first step on people's journey. And that's what we've tried to do with all the digital skills work that I've been involved in, but also that's absolutely how the OU go about things. And, you know, I have not got the answers to very much stuff, but what I do really believe is if you start with a real benefit to people that's personal to them, and that I cannot think of a better landscape than the one that you guys work in, then you've got an incredible opportunity not only to empower people, but also to create something of meaning and value beyond their own personal journey.
That's brilliant. So it's very much sort of thinking about the need and about people's lives rather than, I guess, technology first. Or
yeah, absolutely, and individual stories and the kind of things that make you feel excited, or the kind of things that, you know, if you pick up a book about a story that resonates very much with you, and then you can lead people on a technology journey because you've got the same elements of that exciting story, then, you know, it doesn't have to be very complicated. Some of you may know my dad's a writer and an academic. He's also the gardening correspondent of the Financial Times, which he's done for 40 years, and he's only 66. And I have had absolutely hell times trying to get him to use technology. I mean, just probably the most dementing sessions I've had any time in my working life. And very lucky for me, the BBC actually filmed one of these sessions, which is comedy gold if you haven't come across it. Anyway, the only reason I managed to get him in the end compelled to properly look at technology and to think about needing an email account was a kind of carrot and stick. So the carrot was that he could look at alpine plants on the web, because he's obsessed with alpine plants particularly, and he quite likes checking that he knows all the Latin names to the absolute right degree. And the stick was that the FT finally said, you know what, you have to actually send us an email with your article in it. So it was this kind of double whammy. But for him, it was gardening. So, you know, starting with those benefits and the stories of those that the benefits fall into, which is what is this room in spades.
And sort of sticking with this accessibility theme, I suppose, and digital being able to open things up to people, publishing is... And interestingly, when I look around the room, I think we're probably a reasonably fair gender split, is that right? Publishing traditionally has had a lot of women in the workforce.
Why don't all the women in the room put their hands up just so that I can see in the dark? Okay.
Probably about even.
Yeah, 60%.
But interestingly, in the sort of startup space and the digital technology space, I would suggest that actually it's not even at all, and it's still completely male-dominated. And, you know, what should we be doing, I mean, in general as a society, but also, is there anything specifically in publishing, given that there are a lot of women in publishing, to start rebalancing that?
We're turning into George Osborne, rebalancing the economy. It's a big and important subject, and the numbers are quite dire. So on the one hand, you know, the tech sector is growing in importance to the economy, it's 10% of GDP, and all of the things that are exciting for someone like me that comes from the tech sector. But then through another lens, the numbers of women in that sector are alarming. And I saw some numbers that were provided by an organisation called Lady Geek recently that predicted if they continue on the current trajectory, so it was taking the most kind of alarmist scenario in a way, that by 2040, 1% of the sector would be female. 1%! While the sector will have grown in importance. So that strikes me as pretty urgent, and even if it's a magnitude of 10 wrong, it's still pretty urgent. And I think it's a bunch of factors. Firstly, absolutely culturally, I think that we still have a dominated venture capital market that is male in terms of its thinking, and I do think they are less likely to take risks with the unfamiliar, and very often female entrepreneurs are unfamiliar. I'm not sure it's changed much since Brent and I went to see that first venture capitalist, and he looked at me and he asked us one question despite having this huge business plan on his desk, and that was, what happens if you get pregnant?
Oh my God.
And and I'm not saying I suffered some terrible abuse as a woman. I got incredibly lucky and many things were to my advantage, but if it was like that in '97, I'm really not sure that it's moved fundamentally on in terms of funding. That's the first thing. The second thing is encouraging women to be entrepreneurs. I'm incredibly lucky. I've had this kind of interesting and eclectic and privileged background, but you need to have that push. So I'm going to do something very unpopular to all the other bosses in the room. If you're a woman in publishing, go and start your own thing. Take the bit by the rein by the bit, whatever the expression is, and do your own thing, because it's an incredible opportunity and time to be an entrepreneur. The platforms are available. There is more money than there's ever been, despite what I just said. And we need women to be bold and have big, ambitious visions, which many women do, but I don't think that they are bubbling up and out yet. So I think we need better funding, we need more women to take the plunge, and we need more female coders and technical architects, and that is a huge piece of it. And just to quickly tell you about some women I met last year. I made a small documentary for Radio 4 about women and technology and coding, particularly in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And there was this incredible woman called Dame Stephanie Shirley. I don't know if you've met her. She started a company in the early 60s which employed only women, only working from home, and only coding. She's famous because she had to get her first contracts from government to do big, complex coding pieces of work, and she wrote as woman, Stephanie, and she got no work, and she wrote as Stevie, her nickname in her family, and she started getting the contracts. So she's quite well known as Stevie Shirley. And at one point, she had nearly 1,000 women all working at home, all coding, working on problems like the black box for Concorde, and working on problems like the Polaris submarine engineering. So it is crap that women are not good at coding, that you can't work from home, and that you cannot do big, complex problems at scale in remote locations. So I think we need to reinvent some of these different kind of scenarios to encourage different ways of working, to encourage more women back into the sector. But it's really important.
We can definitely do that in publishing. I won't start on it because I feel really passionate about it too, but yeah, absolutely, we need to just do more. I want to talk a little bit more about, I suppose, a different thing, which is more a cultural digital thing. Yeah. And it's around this idea that, so as you say, digital channels and online channels and websites have opened up so much to so many people. So we now socialise, we're dating, we're shopping, we're banking, we're booking our travel, we're organising our lives. All of these things are pretty normal now. In the UK, and yet there is still this sort of backlash, and I've heard it again this morning, in fact, but there was backlash sort of ongoing slightly at the BBC at the moment for proposing to turn BBC Three into an online-only channel. We still hear this gloomy, dramatic language about the death of books when we're talking about print. Why is there this emotional response to a kind of technical cultural change?
If you are a new peer in the House of Lords, the first thing that is given to you is a coat hook. I am very interested in how the establishment in this country is really very risk averse and really isn't kind of adaptable and flexible. Wouldn't it be much more awesome if the first thing you were given was a tablet and actually sent an enormous signal to how you're going to think about legislation in the country and governing and so on and so on. Coat hooks are very useful, but tablets are really quite phenomenal. And I use that as a slightly ridiculous example because it is very interesting how, despite all of the excitement around the digital landscape in the UK, the number of startups is higher than it's ever been. We've got lots of focus from governments, but also the corporate sector, on creating a very exciting digital place to be. But only 4 FTSE 100 businesses have any kind of digital executive on their board. I'm on the board of Marks & Spencer, and Laura Wade-Geary is on our board. She's an executive director for all the multi-channel stuff. She is very unusual. And I would argue that if you haven't got our biggest companies, who are our whole economy, putting that importance in digital, then that is quite a substantial issue. And that whole way that we structure ourselves is still very cautious. And I think we are often alarmed about change rather than embracing it and seeing it as something exciting. I'm not meaning throw away everything old at all. You know, I am an ancient historian, and I hope I see some value in the links through history. But I do believe that culturally in the UK, we are very often pessimistic about opportunities rather than optimistic. And I think we are not bold yet enough in our establishment in how we could use some of the incredible tools that are at our disposal.
And so I suppose the message for people in the book world in that is to carry on and ignore the doom and just show good things.
I mean, I think that there is obviously important bits of debate that need to happen about some of the doom. You know, I'm very concerned that, I see this since joining the Lords, we don't have a quality discussion in Parliament about the whole of the data sweeping that's been going on. You know, it's been well documented in The Guardian, but not many of the other papers. And actually, Obama had all the tech companies in, but we haven't done the same here in the UK yet. So there are lots of things that need to have a proper debate. And I'm not a kind of crazy, technology's brilliant and that's it. It's a tool and some things are good, some things are less good, we should talk about it. But overall, I think the thing that I find interesting is that the technology landscape for me has presented the opportunity for innovation and reincarnation and change at a rate that has never before happened. And if you do not think that that's important and you don't embrace that, then I really think you're not going to be able to survive in the future. So if I look at big institutions or big corporates, the ones that are successful are the ones that are flexible and look around and think they've got to make themselves resilient to that change, because you're never going to be able to predict what's going to be the most successful thing in the future.
And you've really touched on lots of this already, but we have a short amount of time, and I really wanted to just ask you, if this is a room of publishing, book-selling, authoring people, if there were, one or two things that we should really care about and prioritise at the moment, what would it be? What would your advice be to the room?
Well, I'm going to start with a selfish one, because we still, I think, have a big issue in this country about people who are able to use technology and people who are not. And I think it's incredibly important that we continue to fight for basic digital skills across our whole community. And actually, that could be a FTSE chairman as much as it could be somebody in much less privileged circumstances. So everything you can do to help me become digitally robust, to support the work of Go On UK, that's a personal plea, thank you. But in your industry, I guess, I'm clearly not going to be able to sort out the economics of the book industry in the next 1.5 minutes, but I do think the consumer has an incredible time of it right now. And starting with the consumer, as I know many organisations are doing, I was looking at what Jamal Edwards has done recently with the serialisation of his book and then the actual publication of a book. Everything is possible, and feeling that it is possible and helping the consumer on that journey. I think you have such an incredible richness of content and opportunity in this room. So I would encourage you to embrace it. I'm an avid reader. I have Stoner on my iPad in an ebook form. I have a paperback book of it because I don't like reading on a screen when I go on holiday. And then somebody just gave me a beautiful new vintage copy of it. I've got all three because all three have different meanings to me. What an incredible opportunity as an industry you have for those touch points in people's lives.
Fantastic. And that was going to be my final question, which was, what are you reading at the moment?
Well, I'll tell you what I'm reading at the moment, which is doing my head in, and I hate giving up books, but I've now literally thrown it in the dustbin, is Karl Ove Knausgaard, I can't pronounce it, Death in the Family. No. And before that, I just finished an author I had not read before, David Grossman, an Israeli writer. You may know him, To the End of the Land, which I found so unbelievably moving. I was just lying in bed crying and crying every night while I was reading it. But I'm going to go back in time because the Bailey's Prize have just asked me if I'd choose my favourite book to promote our Women's Prize for Fiction, and I've chosen Mary Barton by Elizabeth Gaskell, because I really remember reading that at age 14, and it had a very important impact on how I thought about the world. So if you haven't read Mary Barton, I encourage you to do so.
Brilliant.
Good bit of social conscience.
That is, I think, a good way to end that. Martha Lane Fox, thank you so much for everything that you have done, I think, for the UK, for giving me my first job, and
that was
coming
my best
here.
move.
I didn't want to put it in the list of achievements, but and for coming here today and talking to us, because it's an incredible honour, and we're delighted to have you. So thank you.
Thank you very much.